If I could give you a survey of the battlefield, once you've put your faith in Jesus, that the hero set you free, the spiritual life is one movement with two parts. It's one movement with two parts. It's a movement away and a movement towards. It's a movement away from ways of thinking and ways of living that isolate us from intimacy with God. And it's a movement towards ways of thinking and living that promote the intimacy with God we're made for, to be who we're truly meant to be. It's one movement with two parts, away and towards. And the Bible has a word for this. It's the word sanctification. To sanctify something means to make it holy. And the word holy means set apart. You hear it in the words. In the Old Testament, there were utensils that were holy in the temple. That meant they could not be used for common things. They could only be used in the worship of God. Do you hear it? In the word holy is away and towards. My wife is holy unto me. Her intimacy is for me alone. No other man may touch her. Away and towards. Some of you have a coffee mug that is holy unto you. No pagan dirty lips may touch it. Do you see that? And so you get this idea of one movement, two parts. Paul told Timothy, flee youthful lusts, pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call out to the Lord out of a pure heart. There's a fleeing and a pursuing. And old school theologians had words for each of these parts. They called this part mortification. To mortify, to kill. There are certain things I used to do that I don't do anymore. They don't belong in my life anymore. I'm not gonna revel in what my king bled out to free me from. So there's some things that were true of me and true of my friends that I have to mortify them and kill them. There's a big no in Christianity, but that's not the end, that's the beginning. It sets me free for the big yes of cultivating intimacy with the God who set me free. If you wanted to talk about it in gardening terms, this would be the uprooting of weeds. There's things in my life that don't belong here anymore. Thoughts that I can't entertain anymore. Places I don't go anymore. There's stuff I don't want in the garden of my soul. And this is the planting of grass and flowers, the cultivating of that which gives life. In a dating imagery, this would be me taking my wife on dates and telling her about my day and listening as she tells me about hers and laughing together and crying together. This would be not hitting her or dating other women. You see it? I move away from things that isolate us towards things that promote intimacy. Now, before we move on, let me just say, for clarification's sake, I'm not saying, so this is the devil side of the stage, and that's the God side of the stage, so get over on that God side, kids. That's not what I'm saying, because what it sounds like is that God's over here waiting for you to get your act together. And that's not how it works. The Bible says that once you've tasted of the grace of Jesus, he will never leave you. He will never forsake you. He will always be with you. But my wife, I know, will never leave me. And yet I can feel miles apart from her, even as she stands next to me, if I've not done the work to cultivate the intimacy with her I was made to enjoy. So the fight of spirituality is a fight for an unrestrained intimacy. And yet here's the reality. That's not done in a vacuum. We have an enemy who hates your king, so he hates you. James says, but each one of us is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Temptation is the moment where our attention is lured. It uses a fishing term. What do you do with a lure? You want to get that fish's attention. You want to interrupt his conversation with his buddies where he's like, anyway, so I says to her, whoa, hello. And you not only want to get his attention, you want to stir his affections. Maybe you get one that looks like a frog, and so you just hop it along sideways so it looks wounded and delicious, and you want him to go, ooh, what are you doing there, little buddy? And then when he enacts the will, you got him, and he never even saw the hook. And some of you go, a frog? Really? That turns you on? Gross. Like, I don't know how you can be a real fish and be attracted to something like that. Ew. Well, that's fine. The enemy just pulls out a different lure for you. Ooh, shiny, and off you go. Right? Each one is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. The best self-knowledge you can have is, how does he get me? Paul told Timothy, watch your life and your doctrine closely. Persevere in this because you'll save both yourself and your hearers. Know your doctrine, Timothy, and know you. Be a student of you. If he's coming for all of us, how does he get me? Let me tell you how he's going to do it. He'll solicit thoughts to the mind to stir your affections, to get you to willfully walk away from your king. Number 2 is you peer downstream. This is what James advocates. James says each one is lured and enticed by his own desire. And he says desire conceives, she gives birth to sin. And sin, when it's fully grown, brings forth death. He looks and says, when you unite yourself with desire, it brings forth sin, rebellion against the king. And sin, when it develops, is the absence of life. And so one of the strategies that James says is before you step into a certain activity, peer downstream and say, if I get in this boat, where's it gonna take me? And is that a place I wanna be? He says, look downstream at the consequences because temptation leads to destruction. And when you can see it, it breaks the spell. And then the last thing is you peer upstream and you start to look at where this is coming from. And it's fascinating what James says. He says, look downstream and see the destruction. But then he says, look upstream and see the deception. He says, don't be deceived, my beloved brothers. And then what's fascinating is he starts to unpack the deception, and the deception's not about sin. He doesn't say, don't be deceived. Adultery's not life-enhancing as you think. Don't be deceived. Stealing money is bad. Like, he doesn't point at all these things downstream. He points upstream. He says, don't be deceived. Every good and perfect gift comes down from your Father above. He points upstream. He says the lie that launches a million sins is the lie that your God is not a good dad who'll take care of you. Where's he getting that? Well, he's getting it from Genesis. How did the serpent come to Eve? Did he walk up to her and go, you know what I was thinking about today? Fruit. You know what else I was thinking about? How yummy it is. Let's eat it, shall we? He doesn't start there. He says, let's talk theology, Eve. Did God really say you can't do everything you want? Just making some observations about your religious commitments, Eve. It seems like they're holding you back from some life-enhancing experiences. I'm just noting, Eve, that you're being restricted like a toddler by your supposedly beneficial deity. I'm wondering, Eve, if there's some real beauty in life you're missing out on because of your religious commitments. And he has to make God look ugly before he can make sin look attractive. And when she starts to believe, my God is held out on me, then the fruit begins to look attractive. So the lie that launches a million sins is the belief that your God is not a good father who loves you. And that is the real battleground, to fight it right there.